Yeah. Okay. My name is Ramirez, as usual. I did have another topic or video. I just forgot that it was somebody's community post that I saw, and some people could call it poetry. I don't know if I would call it poetry for sure, though. Okay. So I really do not like zealotry, zealotry or zealots. What do I classify as zealotry or zealots? If so, one of the terms that I felt like I coined as early as 20. So when I first started getting into politics was when I got seriously injured. I could not move. I was bedridden for like a few months. So during that time, I had the absolute pleasure of being so bored out of my mind that I watched the Kavanaugh hearing from beginning to end. And while watching the Kavanaugh hearing, I discovered and witnessed some of the most interesting behavior that I have ever seen. Like, I've never seen this level of blind faith in terms of giving leeway. To me, it was just like, whoa, how did we get here? And in understanding that, I began to make kind of one of my first dissertations. Like, I have it written somewhere, but I definitely don't want to read that one. Um, I began to understand that some people had abandoned, um, I want to call it logic, but what do I call this word? People abandoned the ability of being able to understand what is right and what is wrong. And it stopped being about right and wrong, and it started being about um, just being right. Just allowing whatever side you were fighting for to be right, to win. So it started becoming more like sports, and it stopped becoming what politics is, right? A logical argument. Because at the end of the day, uh, there is some stature of morality that comes from being a politician, or there is this status that comes about handling politics. But all right, this is in the context of the Kavanaugh hearing and all this other shit. But something that I noticed just across the board with, oh yeah, I forgot that I switched. Something that I noticed that across the board, regardless if you were LGBTQ, regardless if you were a feminist, regardless if you were a Democrat, regardless if you were gay, straight, or lesbian, there was a clear divide between left and right. And both of them did not get to the heart of any issue. You know what I mean? We talk about gun violence, and we talk about saving innocent lives by taking away guns, but these are the same people that will ignore the the absolute atrocities that are going on in Atlanta, Chicago, New York. I can't say LA is that murderous, but there are some areas. We'll ignore these parts. We'll ignore the fact that all of these areas have one thing in common: they're using illegal guns. Another problem that I always notice, and it's a contradiction, is right. We talk about wars and we talk about atrocities and we talk about gun violence and all this other shit. The Democratic side, yet it was their president that completely destroyed my mom's country. Mexico is in the state that it's in right now because of Fast and the Furious. Because ever, like, what, you think that all of those weapons that were sold to the cartels just disappeared? You think cartels just grew a heart 3 times the size and decided to throw away all those guns? No. To this day, right now, I always talk about this. The murder rate in northern Mexico is worse than the rates of death in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, active war zones. Mexico is experiencing far worse atrocities. And it's not even over. Oh, it's still about whatever. Point is, zealots play stupid games. They ignore the facts, they ignore what their words are implying, and will just only care about it from a team's perspective. So I ended up calling these people identitarians. They do not care about what is right or what is wrong, what are the effects and what are the causes. They do not care about these things. The only thing they care about is their identity and whose side wins. But who dictates the side? Who dictates what team you're playing for? Well, that's the mainstream media. They're the ones that are largely building optics. This is why I always say that I do not play games. I refuse to play your black and white checkerboard. I refuse to acknowledge all this. Because, in reality, I'm somebody who sees past that. I'm somebody who would look at the words that are being said and can understand that this is just complete is useless rhetoric, right? Like, so some people will look at Obama and Mitt Romney as two different people, or two sides representing two different sides, right? Obama's a Democrat, Mitt Romney's a Republican. But the way I see it is they're the same thing. They're playing for the same person. They're being paid by the same people. So in reality, they're on the same side. But the optics that are created through media, the optics that are created through YouTube, the optics that are created through labels, through terms, through definitions, would point otherwise. So if people don't have the wherewithal to understand what implications are and what, right, having the ability to comprehend what these decisions would entail and would cause and what effects they would have, they don't care about that. All they care about, right, like, that's too hard. I can't think. The only thing I care, red, blue, haha. And that's all they really care about. They're identitarians to their very core. And something that, while learning about why this is, I came across Stalin and his term, the useful idiot. Essentially, Stalin was one of the first people to figure out that if you meet the majority right, if you create a majority populace and you meet their conditions and you create the air of, oh, we're being strideful, we're winning, this and that. Essentially, Stalin was kind of the first to use boogeyman tactics, in the sense that he blamed, right, all of his shortcomings, he blamed on the boogeyman. Everything that he did wrong, he blamed on the boogeyman. Because in reality, people, the way they viewed themselves was a team, was an identity, was something that, right, they couldn't look at the facts, right? Because all they saw was, yes, the color red, and we have to follow our identity that we now all assumed. And then the process of doing that, he committed some of the worst atrocities towards Christians in the use of zealotry. It gets worse because that's just one representation of it. Italy, right? And it's funny, right? The three same guys that I named that lived in the same area used the same tactics on their people, which was create an identity, create strife, create this air of perception of one class versus another class of people. And that will create the stage, or it'll set up the stage in order for the conflict to continue forward, right? Because it's an us versus them mentality. It's why oh yeah, one of the other aspects of how I discovered identitarianism is here in the States, watching white people say that all white people are the same. And I'm like, whoa, say that one more time? Yeah, white achievement is all the same. I am white. That means German achievement is my achievement. Normandy's achievements are my achievement, right? I saw white people make the argument that all of their achievements are the same because they're white. And I'm just like, if you were to say that in Europe, if you were to say that to a white person in Europe, they would probably beat the fuck out of you, like, because you're retarded, like you're stupid, like that does not make sense in reality, because you have to understand the history of America, how it came to be, and the fact that, like, the people who created this nation intended for your people to mix with other white people. Like, that was the intended purpose, because the way they saw it was, you're just a workforce. You're just a labor horse. You don't really matter at the end of the day. All that matters is go farm, go do your job. That's all that really matters to the imperialists, the oligarchs, the bureaucrats, the bourgeoisie, whatever we want to call these fucking people. And yet, nobody wants to ignore that. Everybody wants to ignore that. Oh, what do you mean? I'm fighting for this team. No, but I'm fighting for this team. In reality, it's the same dude funding both sides. It's like dead ass. It's like let's use the NFL for an example. It's like the NFL owners all hang out with one another. They all kick it with one another. They're all super cool with one another. But meanwhile, the identitarians, a great example of this is the Dodger Stadium here in Los Angeles. How many instances have we had where one team, well, their fan base, not the team, the team's fan base will then will cause violent interactions with the other team's fan base, and it's always a bloody affair. And that's just here in the States, right? It is not as bad as Europe. If you look at some of the soccer matches in Europe, holy cow, that opens up a whole other perspective of this identitarianism, because just look at soccer hooligans. Soccer hooligan culture is literally built on identitarianism. The idea that their identity far supersedes any other meaningful rationality. And I hate to say it, a lot of people suffer from identitarianism. And I'm not trying to point fingers and be like this or that. In reality, these are the people I hate. Like, I just detest these sort of people because I dislike deception. I dislike manipulation. I grew up seeing so much of it in my life that it just irks me in the wrong way. Like, it really just sets a fire in me where I'm just like, I need to destroy you. I need to completely dismantle this structure, because this does not stand for what you say it stands for. So it's kind of why I will always pick a fight with any of these religious institutes. And I know that puts my life at jeopardy, because I love my life. I have no ideas of ending this life, because I still have much work to do. But in reality, me speaking against these religious factions is whole level of problems. And a perfect example of this is Abraham Lincoln. People don't know this, but right before Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, what did he do in the court? Who did he fight representing? And why was there a man who wept, who cried, and who felt guilty for putting Abraham Lincoln in that position? This man claims that the people who assassinated Abraham Lincoln were not people of the party. It was the Vatican Church itself, because Abraham Lincoln was the only lawyer to actually take the Vatican to court and win his case. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? But religious zealotry. My Catholic Church could never do that. And you want to know what was even funnier about that story? Because this is these are actual court documents. This went to litigation. The people who harbored the assassin were the most faithful Catholic family in that area. Isn't that funny? Right? That a priest could go up to this family and be like, for the grace of God, for divine will. Just imagine the sort of verbiage that he used. That is so... This is the sort of shit that really gets me angry, because it's all for political gain. It's all for attaining and gaining some ground on a political front, on a power structure level. And people just don't want to acknowledge the fact that everybody, the way our education system is set up, the way our entertainment system is set up, the way our entire life is set up to create zealots, to create zealotry, to create cult members. Because just look at what happens when you don't affirm somebody else's reality. You are met with complete and utter visceral reactions. It baffles me, but I shouldn't be that surprised, right? I should know what it is. But it just hurts. It hurts so much. And which is why I wanted to bring up this post. is from the boy. I should probably zoom in to some degree. I can't read it. Okay. This is the boy Rodney. I don't know. Either way, I'm just gonna read it. I am judgmental, intolerant, and full of hate. I am judgmental, intolerant, and full of hate. Funny. I will judge others by the way they treat me and others. I will judge someone by their actions. I will not wait. I will not tolerate toxic and divisive people. I will not tolerate those who are intolerant of others. I hate injustice. I hate intolerance. I hate deception. I hate those who will call evil good and good evil. I am judgmental, intolerant, and full of hate. So some people could call that poetry. I don't know what I would call that, but it just it sits with me. I'm not gonna say that I'm not gonna say it's good or bad, but it sits with me in a sense that I know what he's talking about. And right, this whole identitarianism became very evident to me because I joined Discord groups. I saw discourse from a day-to-day perspective, and I saw how the news and the Discord moved from a day-to-day perspective in normal people's lives. Granted that online communities are a very specific sample size, and granted that the online communities that I was dealing with were of a certain age demographic, but that gave me enough to understand that what the normal opinion is, and like how these concluded, like, right, hearing their opinions, I can gather a good sense of understanding how some of these people got to these initial opinions to begin with. But it also gave me an understanding that there is another opinion, the one that wants to state itself above all others, the one that wants to slam on the desk. You're wrong. You can't say that. I'm an authority. Or people that will come in and be like, well, what's the other one? You got evidence for that? Well, let me see that evidence right now. We're not going to move this discussion until you give me evidence right now. And people would be... I remember one time, the only time I ever encountered that, which was what taught me a very important lesson, which was researching the Federal Reserve. Like, I literally pulled, right? This was the first time that I encountered somebody who was a paid actor, somebody who was just paid to repeat something. And I remember literally going to the federalreserve.gov website and being like, dude, I literally gave you a .gov website. I gave you the Federal Reserve's website themselves. I'm proving to you how this works. And he wouldn't have any of it. He literally, I don't believe it. And then he just awkwardly disconnected, and everybody was, dude, I still remember everybody's reaction of like, whoa, that was really weird. Like, you actually gave him everything he was asking for. And it wasn't even that much. I was just proving how the Federal Reserve System works. It's just like, dude, this is how it works. I'm sorry, but the Federal Reserve gets lent money by these banks, and the transaction that occurs between them is a bond. Like, whoops. Either way. But it was because of zealotry. It was because, now I understand it more than ever. Either he was a paid actor, or he was just somebody so caught up in his paradigm that he could not find it in himself to break out of it. Very interesting stuff. Now I got a bunch of sirens going off outside. I live by a fire department. I live by a police station department. This is like, oh man. Zealotry is wide. Identitarianism is wide. And this term, identitarianism, I've been using for quite some time. I don't think I've heard anybody else ever use it. But it's a thing, right? Just the same way that's libertarianism, just the way that there's capitalism, just the way that there's socialism. Identitarianism is at the heart of every single one of these because it requires a level of disbelief. None of them will... Well, in reality, you shouldn't approach it that way. In reality, you should approach it from the objective standpoint, from the logical standpoint, from the standpoint of what if I have these set of actions, this is the cause that I want to create, but what is the effect that actually happens, right? There is none of that thought process that goes on. And because of that, people are like, one of the arguments that I heard a lot. I hear this argument a lot. Even to this day, I hear it with Nick Fuentes, where he'll say that all we need to do is kick out all the immigrants and the world will work. And I'm like, that's not how it works anymore. Like, you do realize if you do that now, you lose a huge portion of a workforce. And empire building, your empire cannot sustain itself without the labor force. Why do you think slavery was a thing? Like, why do you think that American corporations incentivize all of these immigrants to keep coming in droves? Like, I know what you're saying, but do you realize that the people in charge have built the system the way they built it because it's the way that it maintains itself? And then there's the cultural problem, where he believes that just because you fulfill the conditions of this one area, that all of a sudden it'll fix the rest of the world. It's like, no, that doesn't fix any of the ideological problems that have developed in the populace, right? You're still going to have a bunch of white people who only want to join and work in these sort of fields and will not want to do basic level field work. Like, they don't want to clean the sewers. They don't want to tend to the farms. They don't want to own land and ranches and all this other stuff. And then the headway of building any of these businesses, the headway in building any of this infrastructure is impossible because it's already all controlled, right? This is why you get licenses. This is why you get taxed for certain things. Levels and levels and levels, but all Nick Fuentes saw was identitarianism. If I get this, utopia. And that level of thought process just kept it, and he was a product of it. I'm not saying Nick Fuentes is the main perpetrator of this. He's just the product of the psychological operation that occurred between, I want to say, 2017 to 2018. And it allowed itself to take a step in the door with Jordan Peterson and the creation of the intellectual dark web, because that was the first time that I paid attention to this on a day-to-day basis. So I know for a fact that it was when Jordan Peterson joined the intellectual dark web that he also started adding rhetoric that allowed for the creation of a counter movement towards Jordan Peterson. In a weird way, creating a militia group, creating an insurgent group inside. This is getting way too advanced. I just wanted to talk about identitarianism and zealots. But yeah, people will abandon right and wrong. People will abandon the complete logical step-by-step process of figuring out if these are my actions, what could cause it, what are the causes of it, and then what are the effects of it. None of that happened. In reality, most Americans are just subject to psychological operations. Most Americans are just subject to the flow and tide of trends. And the people who largely control them nowadays are, by and large, tech companies. It's why I always talk about Ellen Pao. I think that was her name. She was a CEO at Reddit, because the moment she got fired, free speech on Reddit died. And that was just one of the reoccurring things that we just kept seeing from 2012 and on, which was the replacement of certain leadership, the replacement of certain respect for freedoms. And it's why I played that video of Immortal Technique talking about how the Obama administration jailed and silenced anybody who talked about WikiLeaks, who talked about the war and the atrocities of the Middle East. But yet, Ukraine, oh, Ukraine, we need to save them. Look at all this horrific footage. We need to do something, guys. We need to stand up and fight for our Ukrainian. In reality, it's just like, so you'll show us that war. You'll show us day-to-day footage of that, but you won't show us any footage of the Middle East? This is one of those things of, I do not like playing games. I do not like being deceived, and I do not like deceiving others. Like, I feel very guilty if I say something in a video and then I want to change my mind later, and like, dude, that shit will run in my head that I have to learn. Stop giving a fuck. If it ever comes down to it, and if somebody confronts you with it, that's your time to explain yourself. Right now, it's time to move forward. You can't, right? Because I'm somebody who gets very hung up on very dumb things. Like to this day, I still think about why I wore the same shirt for a video where it was just like, why did I change shirts at that moment to record that video? I was about to go do a workout session, so I was wearing an old shirt, and it lives in my head. I don't know why. It's just me. It's just me. But identitarians, zealots, a lot more could be said. I could write probably 50 pages just about this subject because something I'm very passionate about because I saw it from a day-to-day basis. I saw it develop. I saw how all of this rhetoric progressed forward. And by and large part, I've also witnessed. It's very interesting how I think about it now because the way that I've lived my life, or the way my life path has been set up in a very strategic way for me to understand this because nobody ever sees past the veil of Leviathan. Everybody always just plays along to the tune, to the rhythm. Nobody will ever stop and realize that there's a Peter Piper. Do. Nobody ever stops to realize that there are these compounding factors of our reality that will assist in the creation of what this world should be perceived as, not be perceived for what it is. Either way, my name's Ramirez, and watch yourself out there because, you know, them religious zealots, they're some of the worst people ever, which is why I like that video because there's an argument that says the reason why government and religion are separate was because government wanted to save religion from itself, because they knew that if you give people the reason, the religious reason, and the legal reason to do something, they will kill everybody. It's just what it is. Because if you don't believe in what these religious zealots believe, you know what I mean? It creates a whole other Leviathan. My name's Ramirez.